Hello and welcome to Hello. You guys, this is like my last couple of live broadcasts have been like one long outtake and I appreciate you. I appreciate you for sticking with me. There's magic coming. There's magic coming. There's magic coming. Get ready for the rest of your life. Hello and welcome to SassafrasCast, a podcast full of witchy insights to help you lead your sassiest life. I am Rorie Kelly, a tarot reader, singer-songwriter, and all-around personal growth nerd from Long Island, New York. In a moment, we will begin the Witchy Weather Report. But first, a shout out to my patrons. If you didn't know, you can support this podcast at patreon.com/Sassafras Tarot for $1 per month or more. I record these episodes live, and my patrons get a private YouTube link before each one so that they can tune in for the live recording, hang out in the chat, ask questions, and get them answered in real time. They also get access to my Discord server where we talk about all things witchy and wonderful, and a shout out in every episode. Here we go. Thank you, Amanda Curry, Melissa Marie Imagery, Rachel Miller, Grayson, Millie Orozco, Ruby, Rebecca Jones, Brittany, Hannah Westlock, Brittany Campbell, and Jen McPhail. I'm so grateful that you are in your world. Now for the Witchy Weather Report. Now, friends, yesterday, as I'm broadcasting this on Sunday, April 21st. It will go out probably on Monday or Tuesday. But as I record this, yesterday was my big Witchy Weather Report broadcast, where it's usually on a Saturday. I go live for 1 hour. I pull cards for anyone I can get to. And I also pull a card for the overall vibe of the moment, the Witchy Weather Report, to let you know what the focus you can have is over the coming weeks. And yesterday I decided that the topic of today's podcast was going to be based on that card pull. My friends, I think that fate/the universe gave me a very good topic for this particular broadcast because it's one I've been talking about a great deal with friends and community and clients over the last several weeks. We got the King of Pentacles. I want to talk about the King and Queen of Pentacles and what it looks like to have true sovereignty over your resources. First, we're going to do the Witchy Weather Report. I'm going to pull a tarot card for everybody. Now, my intention when I pull this card is that wherever and whenever it find you, that it have meaning for you right in the moment. So whether or not you're listening live or you're listening right when the podcast comes out, if you're here 5 years later and you've just discovered my podcast and you're binging, first of all, welcome to SassafrasCast and thank you. How's the weather in the future? And secondly, my intent is for this card to be meaningful for you right now as you're listening. That is my intent. Our card is the King of Swords. It's interesting what kingly energy we have on this broadcast today. Now, the King of Swords is sovereign in his life due to his command of wisdom, and there's also a strong right and wrong thing that kind of is underlying the King of Swords, because it's not just about facts and the scientific method, which he regards as like truth, right? He's about truth. He's about truth and justice and what's right. All of those things together. Now, justice, of course, is subjective. And I will say, if the King of Swords has a flaw, it's that his thinking is black and white enough that he may not see how subjective justice can be. He has a belief that there is a correct answer and that close enough inspection and research will yield that correct answer, right? He trusts in the scientific method, so if we don't know the answer yet, he trusts that further research will result in us understanding the correct answer. This can also mean that he has blind spots, that he can be stubborn, he has difficulty acknowledging more than one truth at a time. There's this sense of ultimate truth with the King of Swords. And the quest is for the ultimate truth rather than the subjective truth. Now, I want to ask you what it would look like to just play with these topics over the coming month. Because as you know, my personal belief on this podcast that I talk about a lot is that belief can be a tool. I also believe in the scientific method, and I also believe that to some extent there is ultimate truth about many matters. For example, I I believe in many of the things that science has revealed to us, right? I um I believe in, and I'm excited to learn about, like, the fact that we can, like, look under a microscope at the particles of, like, our blood, for example, and see a lot of different things and understand how different diseases can be combated by digging deeper and looking within our internal systems, right? Their medical science has made quite a few advances and helped us to better understand the very basic stability need to take care of ourselves. So there's some ultimate truth there, right? There's some ultimate truth that, like, for example, hydration checkpoint, if I don't drink enough water, I will die of dehydration. And it's like there's also some ultimate truth of, like, that's going to take a lot of time, right? It's not just going to be about me, like, forgetting to drink my full intake of water for one day, right? This is a very extreme circumstance. Um, but there is an ultimate truth that the human body needs water to survive. I'm going to drink some right now. Hydration checkpoint, drink with me. Now, there's also the the concept of subjective truth and of your truth. And many things we don't have full data on, right? There are many things in life that it's harder to kind of quantify into a truth because it's about subjective experiences, and psychology and spirituality are some of those things. The different things that we believe and why we believe them. There's actually been a great deal of advancement using the scientific method to observe how the human mind works, how it catalogs different experiences we have, how it responds to different experiences we have more recently. And this is like the origins of psychology. I'm talking about the works of Freud and Jung, and their colleagues, as we developed a model for modern psychology. More recently, we've developed more of a model of how the mind and the body are integrated in the processes of these different human experiences, and how trauma resides in the body, and how autoimmune diseases, which I just read this really interesting statistic, which is that over 80% of autoimmune diseases are suffered by women, and that autoimmune diseases are also highly correlated to trauma. And so correlation is not causation. We don't have full data about it. We have some data about it, right? And it's important for us to be aware of that. And it's important for us also to arrive at, here's the point, to arrive at a working model that we can thrive in our own mind, in our own lives. There are many things in life that we don't have the full data on. We're just never going to know every little thing, right? And so we have to have a working model of truth, of what we believe to be right and wrong, of our value system, as well as our best guess at what is objectively true, so that we can, like, walk around and make functional decisions, right? Like, I can't, if I'm worried that I'm coming down with a cold, right? It's not to my benefit to, like, run out. There's not really a test for the common cold. Like, you kind of either, the test is wait around a couple days, right? So if I'm running around and I'm like, I don't know, am I coming down with a cold? Who knows? The functional truth is I don't know whether I'm coming down with a cold. The useful subjective truth is, since I may be coming down with a cold, there are a few things I can do to take care of myself and protect others, right? I can wash my hands more frequently. I can look at ways to get more vitamin C into my body. I can stay hydrated and drink fluid. I can get some extra sleep because I know that these factors influence my immune system. I don't know. I can do all these things whether or not I'm coming down with a cold because I don't actually know. Sometimes you just feel crappy for a couple days. Sometimes we tell ourselves, I'm going to fight this off, and then we totally get a cold. And so functionally, the functional truth for me is if I'm not sure if I'm coming down with something, I'm going to take care of myself, and I have kind of a toolbox of ways to do that. So that's the difference between functional truth, right, and objective truth. The objective truth is I don't always know. Is it a cold? Is it allergies? Is it COVID? Like, these are conversations we've been having ad nauseum since 2020, right? But the functional truth is, regardless of what it is, I can take some good precautions, both to help keep myself from getting sicker, ideally, or help it, run its course more quickly, and to help avoid me transmitting anything I may have to somebody else. So that's a functional truth, right? And the King of Swords like, I'm going to just invite you over the coming weeks to ask yourself about objective truth and functional truth. It helps to just check in with both. We can't know everything about everything. And sometimes reminding ourselves of that is very, very helpful. When we're having a conversation with someone and they're pressing our buttons, it's very easy to jump to conclusions about what is happening, to perform some mind reading, right? And be like, okay, you're saying this about me. So are you telling me I'm a liar? Are you saying this? Do you mean to imply? And the truth is, the objective truth is, we can't know what's in their heads. We can't know exactly what they're trying to say. We also know that communication is imperfect and they may be trying to say something different and not expressing themselves well. And the communication's imperfect on our end, which, they might be pressing a button, right? A button for us that makes us kind of get reactive and makes us overreact. So here's a time when it's important to remind ourselves that we don't know the objective truth and to choose a functional truth in its stead. When there are times when we don't have all the facts, which I'm going to share with you is most of the time. Most of the time in our lives when we make decisions, we have some but not all of the data. And I'm going to suggest to you that it may be worthwhile for you to get comfortable learning how to make decisions with some but not all of the data, because that's the majority of decisions you'll have to make. Now, I happen to know there have been studies on this, and that there are people, many people in fact, who will put off making a decision without having all of the data, even if a change in the data would not affect the decision. This is really interesting. We're getting nerdy today. There was a study done that basically was like, you have choice A and choice B, right? You're going to receive some information that's kind of related to your choice in 2 days. However, ultimately, if you want to make choice B, regardless of the information you receive, there are people who will still put off making the decision, even though they already know they'll make the choice, regardless of the information that comes in. It's really interesting. And this is like human psychology. We think we're making very rational decisions, and often when we unpack it, it's not that simple. So I want to ask you over the coming weeks to examine what you really know and ask yourself what functional truths you can arrive at. I don't always really know what someone is trying to say to me if they're pissing me off. I could certainly jump to some conclusions that they're being condescending, that they're putting words in my mouth, that they're saying something about me when in fact they're just, expressing concern about a situation, whatever, right? Like, we can all jump to conclusions. Objectively, I don't know anything more than what they're saying and the simple fact that communication between humans can be fallible. Miscommunication is a real thing. And so my functional truth has to be for me to lead a comfortable life, right? My functional truth is, okay, I'm not sure if you're, like, I'm not sure what the goals of the other party are. So I'm going to be aware that I don't know what I don't know. And I'm going to just try to act on my values, right? My functional truth is, if it's somebody that I respect who has respected me, I'm going to try to act as if they mean me no ill will and get to the bottom of the miscommunication in a loving way. And my other functional truth is that if it's someone who's been toxic to me repeatedly, that I don't owe them a lot of time to try to figure that out, right? Two functional truths. So that's my invitation to you in the coming weeks, is identify your own functional and objective truths in a situation, because they will and should be different. Let's talk about the topic of claiming sovereignty over our resources. The King and Queen of Pentacles are sovereign over time, energy, and money in their lives. I want to talk about what sovereignty means and doesn't mean. I want to have a really deep conversation about what it means to claim your sovereignty. And when I say sovereignty, I mean leadership. I mean taking um, taking wise accountability for your resources. I mean stewardship. I mean being the adult in your life. That's what I mean when I talk about sovereignty. And I want to talk about sovereignty as it relates to our resources, our time, energy, and money. When we talk about resources, for starters, we're not just talking about money, but money is a real component. In fact, it's a huge component, because time, energy, money are a trifecta that can all affect each other. If money is tight, time often becomes tight because we're trying to pick up extra things to make more money, or trying to solve that problem in one way or another. So it may feel like we don't have very much time. Perhaps also there are problems that could be solved with money, but we don't have the money to solve them. And so we end up having to DIY solve them. So we end up taking up our time doing things we wish we could pay another person to do because we don't really understand them, but we don't have that option, right? So we see how a lack of money can affect time. Similarly, a lack of time can affect our money, right? I've been really learning about this as a recovering workaholic. When I overwork, when I put too much in, when I am using too much of my kind of mental health and physical health resource by throwing too much of it at work and not giving myself adequate recovery time, what happens is my money also suffers. Now, this is something I've had to learn and has been a hard lesson as a workaholic, because my thought process is work harder, work more and more money, right? But there is a point of diminishing returns where I become truly less effective when I'm not replenishing my body and my mind effectively. And so I make stupid mistakes. First of all, I make mistakes that have to then be corrected, which takes more time, which makes it harder to get things done productively and make my money. And secondly, I make stupid mistakes in the form of not, being so busy running around that maybe I don't realize that an auto withdrawal is happening on a particular day, and making sure the money's in my bank account to avoid getting hit with a bank fee, right? Like those kind of stupid mistakes. Having very little time can affect your money. Now, when we talk about energy, it's very tied up. Like energy is, for me, my catch-all for like the mental and physical health component. How many spoons we have, if you're familiar with spoon theory, which is brought to us by the disability community, and the idea of, okay, how much spoons represent the energy you have to face your day, to face your challenges. And if the average person has like 12 spoons to get through a day, and it only costs like, one spoon to take a shower and get dressed and get out the door for work, and they have plenty of spoons left to do their work. Whereas somebody with a chronic illness or chronic pain or a disability, taking a shower, getting dressed, and going to work may take the majority of their spoons. And so it then becomes very difficult for them to be effective for the rest of the day, and they crash. So energy is spoons, like, to me, right? Like that's my catch-all. Is energy is about, are you able, like, how much internal resource do you have, both in terms of your physical and mental health, to attack to attack life's problems, to attack your goals, to go after what you want. If your energy is very, very low, we hope that our time and money is high, because we need some time to recover, right? It can be very hard to be effective when our energy is low. And even if we do have, those other resources in spades, it's difficult for us to enjoy life and live a meaningful life if our energy is in the basement. So these three resources affect each other. And we don't have full control over any of them, but we do have influence over all of them. And that is what I want to talk about now when I talk about sovereignty. Claiming sovereignty is a thing you can do and should do in your life, and I want to talk to you about what it is and what it isn't. It is about influence. It is about stewardship. It is about accountability and wise choices. It is not about control. Because it's unrealistic to make it about control, right? Now, we can certainly talk about monarchs who have identified sovereignty with full control over their people and abuse their power. There's the adage, absolute power corrupts absolutely. The good news is you can't possibly have absolute power over your time, energy, and money, because life just isn't set up that way. You and everyone you know has free will, right? And also there are systems and circumstances that are bigger than you and each other individual that you know, that are also acting upon us, both in terms of like the literal weather, like global circumstances, right? Like situations like an earthquake. We had an earthquake hit New York a couple weeks ago. It wasn't a super big one, but if it had been, that would have like seriously disrupted many of our lives, and that's outside of our control, right? And also situations that humanity kind of as a whole has some influence over, but an individual has less influence over. And I'm talking about things like systemic injustice, social inequity, fiscal inequality. Each of us can and should do our part to try to improve those situations in our world. And also, each of us only has a small amount of influence over it. So both things are true. We have to learn to, this is about functional truth, right? We have to learn to both work in the system that we have for our own benefit. We can't put off our own joy or our own happiness or our own stability for a magical time when the oppressive systems and structures go away, because if it's not going to happen in our lifetime, we still deserve to have a good life. And also, it is true that yes, we should work to dismantle oppressive systems and structures. Yes, we should do what we can to fight back. Both things are important. And this is part of claiming sovereignty over your time, energy, and money, is identifying areas where you may wish to have some influence and impact, and also identifying how much of yourself you can give to each of those areas, because there's only one of you. Hydration checkpoint, then we're going to talk about some tricks that your mind can play with you around this. The two major tricks are two ends of a spectrum that are both false. It's a false black and white, it's a false binary. And the tricks are, I have no control, so I do nothing, right? The people who are like, well, I don't have any control over the political system. I don't have control over big banks. I don't have control over the social inequities of the world. I don't have control over all of this. So whatever, right? So whatever, I do nothing. And I don't just mean I do nothing to dismantle those problematic systems. I also mean like, whatever, I have no control, so I'll just follow the path of least resistance in my life. Now that's a trick and it's self-sabotage, right? I have no control, so I won't even try. You're allowed to feel that way. No one's stopping you. But I don't think you'll have as good a life. I don't think you'll have as good a life if you're like, well, I can't have a good life anyway, so I might as well not make any effort, right? There probably are some things you can have some influence over that will improve your life, even if you can't do the ultimate thing, right? Do the ultimate thing being, I don't know, like dismantle our society and create a wonderful functioning utopia. Like, and if you come up with a way to do that, great. But in absence of that, I think we do still deserve to try to give ourselves and those around us a good life. And the other trick your mind will play on you is, I have all of the control and I create my own reality. Like, this is a really, really harmful quadrant of, I guess, the New Age manifestation community. There are people who call it the New Thought movement. There are many people who associate these beliefs with The Secret. Here's the problem. I create my own reality, in and of itself, not a super problematic phrase, except that it paints you as a mountain. It paints you as omniscient, as though you are the god of your own particular life, when in fact, you are co-creating reality with literally every other human that you share reality with, as well as factors that, like the weather, like, okay, an earthquake, a volcano, whatever, and as well as systems that other people have created that came before us but are still here affecting us, right? Like, like the current mode of politics and the current mode of commerce and stuff like that, right? Like, we didn't create those things. So do we create our reality? So for starters, the King of Swords would tell us it's objectively false that we create our reality. It's also harmful, because when we take that belief to an extreme, if we say I create my own reality, it's falsely empowering. The initial message is, I create my own reality, so all I have to do is think the right thoughts and vibrate at the right frequency, whatever that means, and I will be able to create the reality I desire. And when we take it, though, to its logical conclusion, which is that, first of all, it's not actually possible for a person to control their thoughts 24/7, nor would it be healthy to try to do so psychologically. But when we take it to the extreme, it's like, okay, so if you get hit, if your car gets hit, if you get into an accident, especially when that isn't your fault, like, I don't know, a drunk driver hits you, right? Did you create that reality? If you have family who in your life who were victims of the Holocaust, did you create that reality, or did they create that reality? No. Like, does a domestic abuse victim create their own reality? Is it their fault they got hurt? No. right? This is a harmful belief that um, there are people who like it because there's the empowering side of, oh, I create my reality. All I have to do is figure out how to control my thoughts and have the perfect thoughts. But it's harmful because then it makes it our fault when bad things happen to us. And sometimes shit just happens. So neither of these things is true, right? We don't have no control because we have control over plenty of things about ourselves. And we don't have all the control because we share this world with other people, right? We're not alone. We're not gods on an island. So let's talk about, in the absence of total control and also the absence of total lack of control, how we claim our sovereignty. It's about the right to make choices. We're talking about time, we're talking about energy, we're talking about money. We can't control our whole reality about any of those things. We cannot control the capitalist system we live under. We cannot control the wage gap that affects women and people of color and means that white men kind of earn the most of us, and there's a descending ladder from there on average about how much we are paid. And the fact that that wage gap lives not just systemically on corporate ledgers, but is being perpetuated in part by people's beliefs, right? Like subconscious beliefs, internalized sexism, internalized racism. It's very difficult when something's internalized like that to really combat it. We can't control that those things exist. Those things will affect us. However, we do have influence. We have influence over our own minds. We have influence over how we respond to harmful systems in our lives and whether we choose to be an agent of change, like a foot soldier of justice. And a foot soldier of justice, I like that phrase because it is the right amount of effort. We don't have massive control. We can't push the big button, right? But we do have the power of being one person on the ground with two hands who can do their best, to make a difference, right? And doing your best to make a difference in a small way can be impactful in bigger ways. We don't have control over our physical and mental health. We do have influence over it. We don't have control over our money. We do have influence over it. We don't have control over our time because in order to make money, which most of us have to do, most of us have to use part of our time, right, towards making money, towards just a simple objective of like getting what we need to survive, right? So we don't have total control over our time. We do have influence over all of it though. And we are in charge individually of our own portion and allotment of it. Now, there is unfairness at play, right? Our portion and allotment may unfairly be different than the person next to us on the bus or the person next to the bus in the limousine, But we do have sovereignty over our own allotment of resources. It's about the right to make choices. It's about standing up for ourselves rather than allowing a situation or person to take our time, energy, money from us as part of the status quo. So it's about us playing the role of the tower when necessary in our life and saying, I don't care if this is the way it's always been done. It's not fair, and I'm saying no. We have the right to consent. We have the right to move on from situations where the math just doesn't work, even if we wish it could be different. And when I talk about math, I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about give and take. I'm talking about relationships of all sorts, romantic, familial, friendships, professional relationships, where there is an energy mismatch, where one person is giving and the other person is taking, or simply where the energy isn't lining up. People want very different things from each other and it's causing discord. We have a right to move on from those situations, even if we wish they would be better, and even if we're not blaming anyone, and even if we are blaming someone wholesale, we have the right to still take accountability for our part in it. And our part in it may just be, am I letting it happen? Not did I make it happen, but am I letting it continue because now I see that it's going to keep happening, so I better remove myself, right? We can take accountability without taking blame, especially in situations of abuse, neglect, or just plain old like where someone's taking advantage of you, which certainly I see happen in work situations a lot, being exploited, being unfairly treated, being asked to give more than your fair share and receiving less in return. We can take accountability without taking blame. It's not our fault if another party or another entity is mistreating us. It's not our fault if someone is trying to exploit us. However, once we know we're being exploited, it does become our responsibility to ourselves to ask ourselves, how can I create change? Because I don't deserve to be exploited. We are taking responsibility for our experience to the best of our ability. No, we can't necessarily take on the big boss and win, but we can look at our options, right? We can look at how we can get out of that situation, how we can improve it for ourselves. We can look at our options. It's also about understanding that we can't always make a third party understand. So we don't need anyone's permission to make choices about our time, energy, and money. Especially, we don't need the permission or buy-in of the person who is messing with our time, energy, and money, right? I'm sure you've had relationships in your life where there's a mismatch, where someone kind of keeps seeming to want emotional labor from you or actual labor from you, and you are not getting your fair share in return. That you're feeling like you are having to overwork your end. I'm sure you've been in those situations before. And I also know from my own experience, what I always want to do is just get the other person to see it. Because if it were me, and someone was like, hey, you're really undervaluing me, and I've done this, this, and this, and you've done only this one thing, and it's not fair, I would want to hear about it. If I was, without meaning to, doing something, which is kind of the only way I would do it, like without meaning to, if I was without meaning to making someone in my life feel like I didn't value them or their labor, I would want to know so I could make it change and fix it. However, if there are people in your life who are toxic and exploiting you, there's a good chance that they're never going to see your perspective. And it's important that you don't need them to take your perspective. You don't need them to see it. You don't need their permission to walk away. So that is part of claiming sovereignty. We don't need somebody else's permission to make a choice about our own lives. And sometimes that choice is about cutting our losses. Sometimes that choice is about charging more sustainable rates and saying, oh, that doesn't work for you. Okay, bye. Sorry to see you go. And sometimes that choice is to negotiate for ourselves. And sometimes that choice is to walk away. So I've defined for you the difference between sovereignty. Like, it's not control, right? It's acknowledging what influence we are having and taking accountability in our lives to have that influence, right? The accountability portion is important, and it's something that this is a topic that I have watched people, especially people with more money and influence, use against people with less money and influence over the years. I've heard people use the phrase personal responsibility as a weapon, specifically to people who are victims of things like systemic injustice, of things like domestic abuse, of things like racial inequality, that's like real and systemic in our society, of things like fiscal inequality. I've seen people use the word personal responsibility when actually what's happening is that if you start your life off with a trust fund of $20,000 that matures to $100,000 before you're 18 years old, and I start my life off with parents that have a lot of debt and no one in my family has ever owned a piece of property, both of us putting in the same amount of accountability and personal responsibility, like, you'll still get much farther than I will, right? That's a hypothetical, but it's a real hypothetical. And so it's like, there's a widespread misdiagnosis, and make no mistake, it's very purposeful. There's a widespread misdiagnosis of people's financial problems and health problems being about their personal responsibility rather than systemic problems. So I want you to know, and I want to make it clear, when I talk about accountability, I'm talking about us taking accountability to do our best for ourselves in spite of the systemic problems and the specific reality we are facing. We all have different things that are affecting us, that are holding us back. We have different oppressive systems acting on us depending on, who we are, like our stats. And also, we all have the right to take accountability to the best of our ability, and that's what personal sovereignty is. So I want to talk about practical and spiritual ways that we can attack this. The practical way I'm going to give you is tracking. I'm a Virgo. Are you surprised that I said data? The practical way, and this is very powerful, and it does take some time and energy, is to track it. And I'm going to suggest wherever you feel like things are not working for you is where to begin your tracking. And part of it is using the scientific method on our lives by gathering data and then analyzing it in a way that is purposeful and laid out rather than filtered through our psychology and the lens of our trauma, our collective society beliefs, like whatever, right? So tracking. Personally, I have gained a great deal by tracking my money. I track every transaction that goes in, every transaction that goes out. First of all, it's made my taxes a lot easier, but I didn't do it for my taxes. I began doing it so that I could have an understanding of what was working and what was not working for me. And it's really that simple. It's not emotional. We remove emotion when we do an effective tracking process. We just look at the facts and we identify, is this working or is this not working? And one data point can be your feelings. When I first learned about tracking, I was suggested to make a spreadsheet. I think this was in Julia Cameron's book, The Prosperous Heart. And the suggestion was I not just write down the transaction, but also how I felt about it. I paid whatever, $23 to Netflix. And how do I feel about that transaction? I received a tax refund of, $1,300. Gosh, it's been a while as a freelancer, but whatever. And how do I feel about that transaction? I received payment from a client, and how do I feel about that transaction? I paid for gas, and how do I feel about that transaction? And now this is that's a lot to take in. So I don't necessarily recommend doing the big feelings inventory forever. I did it for a few days and it was eye-opening. What I have kept up with is tracking those individual transactions because it takes 2 moments in the moment, right? It's the moment where you pay for something or receive payment, and then it's a second moment where you jot it down, right? It's very little time if you do it that way. And then taking the time to look at what you've tracked. Now, what I've done with that information for me financially is identify leaks. I've also taken myself off the hook for some things. I had a very strong belief, and this is a little bit because of how society talks to women about money. I had a belief that I was wasting too much money on outside food. So I'm a full-time freelancer and I'm a musician, and there are days where I'm out of the house for like 16 hours. And I do my best to plan ahead and take food I can bring with me and make coffee at home and bring, a bottle of water with me and all of that. And sometimes it's functional and sometimes it just really isn't. And I really had this belief man, I must be spending so much of my money at 7-Eleven. If I just eliminated that, I bet I could solve my financial problems, right? It's that adage, right? If millennials would just stop eating all this avocado toast, or stop buying your coffee from Starbucks. And you know what I found out when I did the numbers and tracked it? The amount that I was spending on 7-Eleven was actually very little. And I say 7-Eleven because that's the convenience store where I live. It's the common one. But whatever. The amount I was spending on food that I ate out was actually very little. And me instead spending that money on groceries and making the food at home wouldn't make a significant impact on my finances was what I found. I was like, oh, it's not as big a number as I thought. And it's small potatoes. This is not the thing to go after. The thing to go after at the time was, I can't remember. I think I decided to look at a few of my bigger bills and try to negotiate them, my cable bill, insurance bill, whatever. Anyway, knowing that gave me power. The other thing that gave me power was looking at my income and learning where the most effective money makers were for me as a freelancer. This was really meaningful. Now, if you're employed at a traditional 9-to-5 job, this may not be as meaningful for you. But for me, it really helped me improve my financial situation by adjusting my income. So tracking your money gives you actionables, and that's what we're looking for when we claim our sovereignty. It's about actionables. It's about, okay, here's where we're at. How can we level up a little bit? And we can't do that without a good understanding of where we're at. Now, when we talk about time, we can do the same thing. We could do a time inventory. This is, again, something that can be time. It itself can take some time, right? But you could do it. You can jot down start and stop of what you're doing at any given moment. You can look at, I'm spending this many hours on this project. Oh, oops, I just spent 20 minutes on social media. I spent 36 minutes making dinner for myself, whatever it is. Now, that's that can feel very extreme, but if you do it for 2 days, two things are going to happen. firstly, you'll have interesting data that you can then unpack and look at, that you can make some decisions based on. And secondly, usually the act of tracking makes us a little better. Usually the act of tracking makes us go, man, I don't need to waste time on this conversation. I'm going to have to write this down, that I spent 20 minutes talking about Dilbert with the guy across the office from me. You know what I mean? Like, never mind. It makes us make some better choices in the moment. Um, but it gives us an idea. It gives us an idea of where our leaks are and also where we can do better. And when it comes to energy, that's a more it's more nebulous to track. It's more about like, what do you need to improve? If there's a health thing, if you have chronic pain of any kind or a chronic symptom of any kind, which um I have got some chronic stuff since COVID. And so chronicling my symptoms has been very meaningful to me and has helped me identify what I can do, especially at times when I couldn't always access the healthcare I needed, and wasn't always, like, doctors weren't able to like immediately get to the bottom of some of my stuff. I just had the COVID mystery bag, right? So some of these, they were just able to give me like kind of very basic generic things, but me actually tracking it let me see, okay, this system is cleared up when I do X, Y, and Z, and it gets worse when I do X, Y, and Z. So it let me just make some better choices for myself. Now, what about tracking our energy exchanges with other people? Like, this feels a little bit over analytical, but maybe it's healthy. What if you took a look at like the last, I don't know, 10 conversations you had with different people in your life and asked yourself how you felt before, during, and after each one? What people consistently make you feel good and what people consistently drain you? And I'm not necessarily saying get rid of the people who drain you, right? Like, sometimes someone is going through something and needs a little extra help, or sometimes one functional conversation needs to be had, right? And that functional conversation clears up the situation. So I'm not saying make, like, jump to dramatic action. I'm saying track it and see what happens, and make yourself a list of ideas if you feel like there's a leak, and see what you can do. So that's the practical way we can claim sovereignty over those things. And the psycho-spiritual thing is to remind ourselves that we have choices. Because after tracking, um, what usually becomes clear for me is, oh, there's a couple of tweaks I can make, right? And so it takes me from a place of disempowerment, this isn't working and I don't know what to do, to here's a couple tweaks, here's a couple things I can try, right? We would love to solve our problems overnight, but it takes baby steps sometimes. It takes like, okay, well, here's 5 things I can try, I'll try this one tomorrow, right? Especially when we talk about like big challenges in relationships or big challenges with money, it's usually not just one thing, but trying a few things might improve things overall, right? So psycho-spiritual practices to help us claim our sovereignty are all about reminding our subconscious that we get to have a say. Because here's another fact that I'll throw at you. Studies have shown repeatedly that we don't make decisions consciously. The majority of our decisions are not made on purpose with our conscious mind. Now, I'm sure you can remember the last few big decisions you made and the time you spent thinking about them, right? But did you decide how you were going to fix your coffee today? No, you probably just fixed it the way you fix it every morning, right? Um, did you decide what method of transportation you would take to the last time you went to the doctor's office? No, you probably just did whatever you usually do, right? A lot of decisions are subconscious, and that saves us some decision fatigue, right? If something's already worked a bunch of times, we'll just do it, right? How will I get to the doctor? I'll just take my car like I always do, or I'll just take the bus like I always do. How will I make my coffee? Well, I like it this way, so this is how. We don't have to dissect that afresh every day. However, there are decisions that we are subconsciously making again and again that may be worth our revisiting, especially when they're psychological, especially when there's limiting beliefs involved. If a parent told us, um, you should never spend your money, you should save it, you should put it in a savings account, and like, you should never eat out, and like gives us all this like list of financial rules for life that may have worked for them, whatever, and then our own life circumstance involves us having money problems and perpetually beating ourselves up about what we are and aren't doing right according to that list, well, it might be worth revisiting some of our choices. Maybe we should be investing our money instead of putting it in a savings account that isn't going to earn us very much in, interest. Maybe it makes sense for us to occasionally eat out if it means that we are, like if we're doing, for example, like a really long work day, then eating out that day might actually mean that we have more energy to be productive during that work day and then can go home and get a good night's sleep, right? It might be a better management of our overall resources. These are decisions that might be worthwhile for us to rethink. When it comes to energy exchange, when it comes to relationships, which affect our time and our energy and our money, if we have people pleasing tendencies, it may be very normal for us to accept the status quo of, like, for example, a relationship that's like, I trauma dump on you and then I end the conversation and you don't get anything out of it but comforting me, right? How many of you have had a friend like that? How many of you have had an employer like that? Because I've had both. Um, and especially when it comes to relationships that are around our professional life, if we have that tendency in a friendship, what does that mean when it comes to negotiating for ourselves with a client or with a boss or with a company? What does it mean when it comes to standing up for ourselves against an unfair policy that is costing us money or doing us harm, coming from, I don't know, like a corporation that we have to work with or whatever, right? Because the truth is, we have a right to negotiate for ourselves. But if our default is, I'm a people pleaser, I don't negotiate, I try to make everyone in the room happy, that's probably because when you were younger, that belief served you and your subconscious was like, hey, this is what we do in the future when there's an uncomfortable conversation with another person. We just let them have their way because that's safer. So we don't have to ever make this decision again. That's what we do forever, right? Just like, oh, I like my coffee with half and half and several sugars. Like, I don't have to make that decision again. I know that's how I like it. This is just how I'll always have my coffee now. One of those, one of those decisions helps us. The coffee decision is like, okay, cool. But the decision of we always let someone else have their way because it's safer, that can really harm us, right? And we don't even know we're doing it because our subconscious is like, I'm saving you time. Don't worry, I made this call for you. So psycho spiritual work around this looks like some reprogramming, and it looks like some shadow work. It looks actually like questioning ourselves. And that's something that tracking can do, especially tracking with, like, there's a relationship between the practical and the psycho spiritual here, where when we track and we track our feelings, it can lead to some very interesting things. When we realize every time I have a conversation with this person who I love dearly, I feel horrible about myself after. That can make us realize that there might be a subconscious decision we're making that is unhealthy for us. It might also make us realize that they're doing something shitty that's hurting us, right? But the subconscious decision we're making to keep having the conversation with someone where they keep being shitty to us and just let it happen is something we can work on. We can't work on it if they're a crappy person to us. We can bring it to their attention and they might or might not do something about it, right? That's one of our tools in our toolbox, is to say, hey, when you say this thing to me, it really hurts my feelings and makes me feel like you don't respect me. And then there's an opportunity for them to evaluate what you've said and change their behavior or not. Some people will, some people won't. Like, that's the sad reality. So it's worth having the conversation. And also, if you continue to have toxic engagements with them, then we have to evaluate other options. We have to evaluate what boundaries we can set with ourselves. Similarly, if we look at our money and our feelings around our money, then likely we're going to get to the roots of some of the subconscious decisions we're making about money. And I'll give you a hint. I heard this on a podcast a few years ago, and it has proven so true in my life that I have kept saying it to everyone I know. Your money problems are your love problems. The problems we have about money are the problems we have about our relationships. And I'm going to tell you why. Your relationship with money is entirely one-sided. That doesn't mean that other things and people and systems can't affect your money, right? They can. However, money is a made up concept. Money is a thing that we all invented together, but we didn't. You and I didn't, right? Like, money is a concept that's been around since before you and I were born. But money is a thing that society created as a means of, like making exchanges between two people easier if we're doing a barter system, whatever. It's not the only way to do that, but that's the way we've all kind of, like, there's a collective reality there where everyone's like, okay, this piece of paper is worth $20, and so when I give you $20, you give me an increasingly small bag of groceries. Like, have a nice day. But how we feel about money is very one-sided, because money is not doing anything to us. Money is a concept that humanity literally created, right? It's a thought form. So think about that. Think about how your relationship with money, how the feelings we feel about money are not about money. In the same way, if you've ever had a relationship with someone and you realize, you know what, I was projecting my shit onto you a little bit. In either direction, right? I was projecting an idealized version of someone who would give me what I really wanted and needed, and then that didn't happen because I made it up in my head and that's not really who you are. Or maybe I was projecting that you meant something by what you said to me and that you were trying to take my power away, and actually it was just a misunderstanding. Like, both things can happen, right? We project all the time in our relationships. Now, I submit to you, your relationship with money, don't hate it, it's real, it's almost 100% projection, because it's made up. Now, it's also based on things like rules that kind of society has established about money and stuff like that. But most of our decisions about money, this is another thing that people have found, are not rational. They're emotional. Most of the choices people make around their money are not rational choices based on fact. They're emotional choices about a variety of factors and how they feel about all of them. And I'm not even here to tell you that's wrong. I'm just here to tell you, we have a relationship with money. And if we start looking at money as a thing we are in relationship with, and look at all the ways we're projecting onto that relationship, we might be able to just clean some stuff up in our lives. We might be able to do some very valuable self work. And it might help our other relationships too. So, our psycho-spiritual job is to do the shadow work that enables us to remember we have a choice. Our psycho-spiritual job around our time, energy, and money is to ask ourselves, what decisions am I making that I'm not even conscious of? Now, what are some ways to do that? I'm going to move into which you got this. And I'm going to offer you a plan for like a 1 week overhaul. And this overhaul is to gain data. So that's really a better thing to say, like 1 week of gathering data. And then we get to, at the end of the week, decide what we will do. And I guarantee you some positive practical change will take course. So I want you to identify the area that sucks for you the most. Time, energy, money. What sucks for you the most? Be as specific as you can, right? Maybe it's money coming in, maybe it's money going out, or maybe you're not sure. Maybe it's time, and specifically it's about time spent at work, or maybe it's time and specifically it's about just feeling like you're doing way too many things. Maybe it's energy and it's about your health, or maybe it's energy and it's about a relationship, whatever. Identify the thing that sucks the most. We're going to track it. You can do this by having like a spreadsheet and organizing it, but also you could just have like a notebook or a voice memo or a notes app on your phone, whatever is easy for you, whatever's easiest for you, to just like jot something down or tap, a button and write it down, or say it into your phone, whatever's easy for you. And every time you engage in that thing, you're going to write it down. We're not looking for, we're looking for quantity here. We're looking for just like try our very best to write it down every time. So for example, if it's money, then it's like every time you have a transaction. If it's relationships, then it's maybe every conversation you have with someone and how you felt after. And that's the data we're gathering. Now this is boring. This part's boring. I know it's not witchy, but we're going to do it. For a week, we're going to track. We're going to track the time, energy, or money, whatever we've decided to track. And the other data point we track is how we feel in the moment that we track it, reflecting on that thing, right? If it's money, it's like, okay, I just spent $20 on gas. How do I feel about that? Maybe I feel fine. Maybe I feel terrified because I don't know how much more money is in my checking account and I have rent to do. Maybe I feel mad because of gas prices. Maybe I feel like I got a great deal because I got like a fuel discount, with a card or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, I'm cool. Whatever it is, I'm going to write it down. If it's a conversation, if it's people, if it's a relationship in our life where there doesn't seem to be a good energy exchange, every interaction, every time you have a text or phone call with that person, we're not analyzing while we track, we're simply tracking, because it's too much to ask of ourselves. We don't have to overanalyze. We can just be like, here's what happened, here's how I felt. They texted me this meme about a bunny and I laughed about it, but then they also said something about my hair that made me feel pretty bad about myself. Okay, And then at the end of the day, at the end of the week, we're going to just look at it. We're just going to look at what we tracked. We don't have to be perfect. If you miss a thing, just keep going and get it the next time. You know what I mean? We like, this is not a thing for you to grade yourself positively or negatively on. It's functional. It's not moral. It's just a way for you to help yourself. So we're going to look at whatever data we do have at the end of the week, and we're going to look for patterns. And then we're going to do some really good psycho-spiritual work. If we find that we're always upset after having a certain type of conversation, if we find that we always feel shame around a certain transaction, if we find that every time we do this one task, it should take 10 minutes, but for some reason it takes an hour, but we kind of know that it doesn't really take an hour to do, it's because we are actually just like, for 50 out of the 60 minutes, like kind of spinning our wheels and being stressed about the thing instead of actually doing it. This is not a place to judge ourselves, right? The actionable thing isn't just do it in 10 minutes, because if we could do that, it would be solved. The actionable thing is to be like, why is this so hard for me? Why am I struggling here? And we are then going to turn the microphone to our subconscious. That's where we get witchy. We're going to ask our dreams. We're going to go to sleep for a few nights and say, tell me about why I'm struggling with this. And we're going to do our best to remember our dreams. And we do this by keeping a dream journal, keeping something right next to our bed. So when we wake up, first thing we do is write down what we dreamed, even if it doesn't make sense. And we're going to see if we can understand any patterns and links. And we're also, we're going to ask our subconscious throughout the next 3 days. We can do this before we go to sleep or first thing in the morning when we wake up. We could do this looking in the mirror while we're brushing our teeth. We're going to ask our subconscious, next time I make a decision around this, bring it up and make it a conscious decision. We're programming ourselves. We're saying, subconscious, thank you, but I got this one. I want to make some conscious decisions because I'm investigating, right? We're going to ask it to give us a pause. We're going to ask it to do us a solid. And it probably will. It loves doing jobs for us. And we're going to, over the next few days, we're going to evaluate, like, where did those feelings come from? We might choose to do a tarot reading. We might choose to do a journaling prompt. We might choose to, like, we're just going to ask ourselves, what makes this hard for me emotionally? This is shadow work. Is there something in my past that it makes me think of? Is there something that somebody said to me once that I keep remembering that fills me with shame every time this particular situation comes up? All we're doing, again, it's more data gathering, but it's with our shadow. That's what shadow work is. It's really about gathering information and then deciding how to be loving towards ourselves, right? Step 3, we've gathered the data about our actions. We've gathered the data about what's happening under the hood subconsciously. And step 3, you might hate it. Step 3 is, how do we be the most loving to ourselves we possibly can around this? Step 3 is, if somebody I love unconditionally with all my heart came to me with the same problem, how would I show them love and what would I suggest for them, right? We're not doing judgment, because how can I be most loving to myself is a very different question than how can I solve this problem. But how can I be most loving to ourselves is often what's needed when it's a subconscious problem that's driving the bus. When our subconscious is like, we have to people please because it's safe even if it sucks for us. Or our subconscious is like, we can't do the thing we love because it's not a real job. So we have to do the thing we hate and just feel like we're wearing a mask all the time because that's what dad said. Or when our subconscious is like, if I don't surrender to what somebody else wants every time I have a conversation, even though they hurt my feelings, then I might lose my relationship. So I just have to go with the flow, right? When our subconscious is making these decisions, it's trying, you can hear in these explanations, it's trying to protect us, right? But it's become harmful now. That's the essence of shadow work. So we're asking ourselves, how can I be really loving? What would you do if someone you love came to you and was like, I figured out that I keep doing this form of self-sabotage and it's because of this thing that happened to me when I was younger. You probably wouldn't be like, well, just to stop. That wouldn't be helpful, right? You might give them a hug about it. You might try to be like, a loving alternate voice. You might try to be like, okay, like you learned this when you were growing up and it sounds like that hurt you. Here's a new option that you can think instead, right? How can we take ourselves in hands and be really loving about it? And I realize this is more on the psychological side than the spiritual side. The spirituality really comes in how we talk to our subconscious. We may ritualize this. We may say, okay, I have this belief and I know it's hurting me, and I'm going to make a ritual of creating an affirming belief instead for myself. Here's what I do when I do this. And we light a candle every day and we chant over the candle something very, very direct to our subconscious, because I'm all about very practical magic, right? So if the thing that happens is somebody lowballs off, so somebody says, like, they offer to meet us 25% of the way instead of halfway, or even worse, right? Like, example, money. Okay, I understand that you don't work for free. How about if I pay you $25 for this 3-hour job? That's like, I don't know, it's well below minimum wage and it's insulting to most freelancers, right? Like $25, huh? And it's like they're making a symbolic gesture, not a real one, right? Um, Maybe it's every time someone lowballs me, I will respond with a more fair suggestion or walk away. And that's really, really specific, right? And what if people are lowballing you in your relationships? What if you keep having to like play therapist for a friend and then they talk to you for 2 minutes about your life and hang up, right? And what if we say, from now on, I'm going to limit my time talking to people who don't know how to be respectful of my time. From now on, this person only gets 10 minutes per phone call, right? And we're going to chant it. Literally, we're going to say it 10 or 20 or 30 times over a candle. We're going to enter into a deep breathing state while we do it. And the reason we will do that is because ritual affects our subconscious, because we're teaching our subconscious something new. Repetition is how our subconscious learns. So if we say 100 times, when this happens, I do this, when this happens, I do this, when this happens, I do this, we have a chance at making a better subconscious decision, because our subconscious is the one making the decisions. Let me know how this works for you. Try this at home. Any of the things I just said. Do a little inventory. Do a little bit of tracking. Do some psycho-spiritual looking within, some shadow work. And then try giving yourself a ritual. I'm going to go deeper with this in the bonus episode. I'm going to give you some very clear-cut direction on 3 questions you can ask yourself to do some good shadow work around a topic around your time, energy, or money, and also a suggested ritual to help you move through it that you can do before you go to bed at night. It's a meditation ritual. So if you're a $5 and up bonus patron, that's what you'll be getting from me. And for everyone else, like, DIY this, like, take a, like, these ideas are for you to run with. So think about this, think about areas you are and are not sovereign in your life around your time, energy, and money. Think about ways you can make some new choices and claim some sovereignty. Do some digging, do some internal digging. That's how we do the accountability. That's how we do the work. We can't control the external. We can have some influence, and we should, but we can control it, like what happens when we look within and ask ourselves, are there ways I'm self-sabotaging? And that's a way we can have the influence externally, by the way. If we do the digging, it might allow us to say, oh, I'm just letting this person walk on me and I actually don't have to. I just realized it might allow us to make the new choice if we do that digging. So that's why shadow work is important. All right, my friends, I want to thank you so much for spending time with me today. If you like this podcast, I ask you to please rate it and review it wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you could take a moment to share it with someone who you think might be interested, I would be very, very grateful. If you would like to support this podcast financially and unlock exclusive benefits, you can do so at patreon.com/Sassafras Tarot for $1 per month or more. Patrons get access to things like extra content, personalized tarot pulls, a witchy Discord community, and more. If you have a question, idea, or suggestion, you can email me anytime at sassafrastarot@gmail.com, and you can follow me on social media at Sassafras Tarot on Facebook, Instagram, Twitch, YouTube, and Twitter. And if you would like to order a reading, you can do so at etsy.com/shop/Sassafras Tarot. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. I am not going to take you out with a song for this particular episode simply because I'm still having some audio confusion. So instead, I'm going to tack on the theme song, the full version of Magick Comin for you. If you are listening to the full recorded version of this, if you're a patron, I'm sorry. Seeing the live broadcast, I'll get you another time. But that's what I'm just going to take you out with the full theme song. If you like my music, you can search for it wherever you listen to music. RorieKelly. You can also visit my website, roriekelly.com, or find me on your favorite social media site. Thank you so much for being in my world. We'll talk again soon.
There are times when she knows that this life is not enough, and all the dull platitudes and the world can't make it so. Working hard every day for the bills she still can't pay. She RPGs late at night into someone else's life. Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Where you gonna be tonight? Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Get ready for the big surprise. When's it gonna be my turn? When's it gonna turn around? When am I gonna wake up happy, knowing what I found? When's it gonna turn around? When's it gonna be my turn? When am I gonna wake up smiling, knowing what I learned? And she lays out the cards to see how the day will be, and she turns with a sigh. It's another one of these, but the wind blows strong now. She knows it's only time, just a matter of time, till she spreads her wings and flies. Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Where you gonna be tonight? Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Get ready for the big surprise. When's it gonna be my turn? When's it gonna turn around? When am I gonna wake up happy, knowing what I found? When's it gonna turn around? When's it gonna be my turn? When am I gonna wake up smiling, knowing what I learned? Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. And she lays her head tonight. She knows it's still not time, and she dreams with the power of a phoenix in flames. And she thinks that she begins to understand what she has inside. It's not a thing to disavow, it's not to fix, it's not to tame. Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Oh, there's magic coming. Where you gonna be tonight?